Welcome into UGA Football Live with JC Shelton, where the dogs come to talk. All right, everyone, welcome in UGA Football Live with JC Shelton. Back here with another offseason episode joined by former Georgia tight end, former NFL tight end, and your resident barber, Arthur Lynch. Artie, I always feel like I don't give you your due for NFL. It's like we always talk former Bulldog Artie Lynch, but he also played in the league, folks. So, Artie, how are you doing, man? We had a contract dispute, me and you. So it took a couple weeks, but our people got with each other's people and got some things signed and put through legislation. So, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. I think it's worth noting that it was the shortest cup of coffee in the NFL. So I will take the introductory credit, but most of the most of the football was played at UGA, but still had a nice cup of coffee, bounced around a few teams, was a sacrificial lamb for some really stud defensive players like Von Miller and Ndamukong Suh one time, which was, my life flashed before my eyes in practice. But all in all, we're doing well.
I love it, man. Let's get into it. So, guys, what we're going to do for this show is really recap some news nuggets, and we're going to start with a really fun one. And if you're a Georgia fan, really in any type of way, you probably saw former Florida State wide receiver Keon Coleman on Robert Griffin III's podcast. I think it was Monday. It was like early week. And he came out and said it had a very interesting take about the Orange Bowl, the number of opt-outs. FSU had like 20 plus. Georgia had none that were injury related. They had a couple there for obvious reasons. Brock Bowers there, Amarius Mims. And both drafted. Keon Coleman was drafted as well to the Bills there. Goes on Robert Griffin III's podcast and has some already I watched it, right? And I came away, I was like, he cannot be serious. Like, that's just, it's the weirdest take. It's like, because here's where he goes with it. Basically, he's blaming Georgia for Florida State's CFP snub. Said if Georgia would have won, Florida State would have played them. Like the committee was not already going to not include Florida State in the Final Four. I think they kind of proved that by how it went about in that last week. But he said if Georgia would have won against Alabama, you would have found out who was better between Florida State and Georgia. You should have played us in the Matter Bowl. That's in quotes, and a bowl that mattered. We're not going to play y'all in a bowl that don't matter. That's a waste of time. And then he went on. He said, if y'all would have won against Alabama and did what y'all are supposed to do, y'all would have had to see us. We would have been doing that tomahawk chop the whole time, all of that barking. We would have put a spear straight through you. Ain't no barking. That's dead. You would have found out, but the world may never know because Georgia decided to lose to Alabama. We should question their toughness to Bama. How do y'all keep choking? Already, to me, I'm going to give you a quick take on it. I want to hear your thoughts because we haven't talked about this, me and you, other than mentioning it briefly and laughing. And I tweeted this too. It's like, if I was him in his shoes and I made the exact decisions he made, that's exactly how, when I put my head on a pillow at night, I would tell myself to sleep, to get any type of rest knowing that happened. What's your thoughts on this, man? Just wild.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all realize that, particularly like if you're on RG3's podcast, and I think RG3 he's very smart, very accomplished, obviously, both as an NFL player and a college player, but he also will say things, and he being RG3, from an inflammatory standpoint, because he's in media, and he's big time media, right? He does like Monday Football Countdown, he's on NFL Football Live, he does college football stuff. And right, wrong, or indifferent, the crazier things you say, and I think this is like a rule that is abided by in American politics, American sports media, Twitter, you name it. Like, you're going to get more traction, attention. This guy, Keon Coleman's a beast. He's an unbelievable player, unbelievable talent. I think he went to the Bills in the first round. But he was either high, which I don't think he was, or he was saying these things on purpose to get people like you and myself and pretty much everybody else in the college football world to be like, is he serious? You know what I mean? And I think, if we're just looking at this things objectively, the Orange Bowl is a bowl that matters for Florida State because 3 years ago, I think they were 3-7, right? I think if anyone can say the Orange Bowl doesn't matter to their program, it's probably Georgia. And obviously, the roles are not reversed. And we can talk about culture. We can talk about, you know, us not having opt outs. We can talk about Kirby Smart getting his guys ready to play in bowls like the Peach Bowl or the Orange Bowl that don't have college football implications or national championship implications. But I think Keon Coleman knew exactly what he was doing. I bet you his Twitter followers got up or his Instagram followers. I'm sure that clip had run, tens of thousands of times. So my guess is he wants to have a podcast of his own here in the next 18 months, and he's going to say some wild stuff on it, and it'll probably be wildly entertaining or wildly infuriating, but either way, it'll get clicks.
Oh yeah, and I haven't thought about it from that standpoint. So I think that's a good take because now that I'm picturing that, it makes sense because
Yeah,
he's
like,
very
he's
entertaining.
not serious.
I
Yeah,
I hope not because that is while
yeah,
entertaining makes no logical sense.
none,
None because
0 cents.
absolutely, and you talk about that too because I think when you say that, you're telling me that if Florida State would have beaten Georgia, they wouldn't have claimed their own national title. I mean, they man, they would have. They absolutely would have. If I guess
100%.
if I had to project it, Nostradamus here, it would have happened. Yeah, and
100%.
it would have been huge for their program. Undefeated season. That's all you'd hear about. That's all they would recruit.
First off, they still put undefeated season on the
They put
rings that
yeah,
they got.
their ACC championship rings. They put unconquered 13-0, which I guess, I mean, if you're talking just the ACC season there, and then winning the championship, but you kind of missed a game.
And I don't blame Florida State for taking the position that they took because they got a raw deal. Like there's no, I mean,
Absolutely.
I agree with them being phased out of that Final Four, but like, you know, they got a raw deal. So
Yeah.
like how they handle it. And but I think if you polled the Florida State team privately and blindly after the Georgia game, they would all say like we were outgunned. Now it didn't matter who we had playing, right?
Mm.
And at the end of the day, they needed a quarterback, an elite quarterback, and they had one, but his leg got decapitated or whatever, or like severed like 3 weeks before. And it's like, that's how football goes.
Mhm.
And then when you lose a dynamic quarterback in this age of college football and quite frankly NFL football, the chances of you succeeding, right? I think the only time they were a team that was able to overcome multiple injuries at quarterback and still go all the way was Ohio State. And it wasn't like the backups were, you know, schlums. You know what I mean? They were good players.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think Keon Coleman, I'm sure he's going to be a stud in the league, but he'll have a podcast in 18 months called like Hot Takes with Keon or something because it's
Yeah.
going to be wild.
Yeah, I like that
You know what I mean?
standpoint, and I agree with you. I don't think he can be serious, but I think the funniest part too, when you think about that, let's say he wasn't. Let's just go with that. Give him some credit here. Um, Florida State fans were agreeing with him so heavily on Twitter. Like
Yeah.
they believe they were like supporting their guy, which I get it. If it was Georgia, roles reversed, Georgia fans would also agree, no matter how nonsensical it probably sounded. But they have absolutely no leg to stand on. Guys, I mean, I put myself. Let's say we're just Georgia fans, and that happens. I'm not saying a word. I'm not like if Javon Bullard got up there and said exactly what he had said. Basically, I'm like, that's cool. Scroll past. I'm not reporting that. Like,
Yeah.
no, I'm not
No,
supporting
no,
it.
it's definitely, but the delusion of your common fan in college football in the Southeast, and I think Florida State falls in the same bucket of the SEC in terms of let's call it the passion. Um, it's unbelievable, dude. It's the absolute best and most entertaining thing. So I don't blame any of them for their irrational thought process. I love it.
Yeah, and then also, I mean, I think it points. You said it earlier, the culture too. You just because it would have been so easy. for Georgia players, and especially now with so many drafted, they're out of school entirely, right? A lot of them, I mean, they might have graduated already. If they haven't, they might not be going back, right? They're out of Athens. They're training for the league in their next step. They could have went and started crying about being snubbed, being the first number one team to drop out of the Final Four, and then the last week of the season in the CFP history. They could cry about it, right? And they had a better leg to stand on than Florida State, right? Because they had their quarterback. They had the probably number one overall pick at quarterback, gonna play, healthy, and slinging it everywhere. They had a better leg to stand on, but they didn't do it. And I think that just shows you what Kirby Smart, the culture, and the mindset he has built into his players. When they get there, that clock starts for them, and then that mindset starts to be developed. By the time they're leaving and stuff, they're not going to cry about these things. That's all won or lost on the field. They move on. It's always the next game. And I think that's also plays into why Georgia had, 28 game win streak, 29. I can't remember exactly now. It's off the top of my head. I think that's exactly why you see a streak like that, because Kirby Smart's able to get these guys forgetting what just happened, whether it be the play, a quarter, half. You look back at those halftime comebacks for Georgia and last season, as they were really finding their own in that team and that identity last year. I think that's another example of that, is why you don't hear those guys talking about this stuff. They can. They're interviewed all the time, especially the NFL guys. They're interviewed, man, 50, 60 times leading up to the draft, and then they're interviewed again after. Do you see what I'm putting down there, Artie?
Yeah, I do. Look, when we're talking about culture, right? And you and I we've been friends now for a long time. We've talked about kind of Georgia football, college football, and kind of what makes things tick, right? And I think I that Ja'Cory Thomas interview that we did and that conversation we had with him, I think was like before spring ball. That had a huge impact on me personally as a former player, because he talked about like the DNA of a team, right? And like every football team, or really any team, right? I think if you're talking about Iowa women's basketball, right? Women's USA soccer, LeBron James Lakers, like whoever it is, right? Like Boston Red Sox, Patriots, it doesn't really matter. Every single team has DNA, right? And I think one thing that Kirby Smart has done a really good job of, and he's clearly followed the lead of Nick Saban on this. Like, remember, Nick Saban had the Bryce Young playing that non-matter game against, I think it was not too late, against somebody. I think it was Wisconsin or somebody like that. But Kirby has developed this DNA in the program, and that DNA basically overlaps each year. And obviously, I'm sure every year he breaks it down and tries to individualize each team to make each team like uniquely special to that year. But I think the DNA of that program is, give me an opportunity to compete, and we're going to compete at an elite level, right? It doesn't matter if it's in the national championship. It doesn't matter if it's a kickoff classic. It doesn't matter if it's a spring scrimmage. And it certainly doesn't matter if it's an Orange Bowl, which I think to Kirby does matter a lot, because when you end the year on a win against an undefeated team, a top 5 opponent, and you're coming off a loss in your conference championship game, hell yeah, that game matters. And Kirby has developed a DNA within the program, and that DNA has infected or has been implemented in each one of his players, his staff members, the training staff, the nutrition staff, and to be quite frank, in the University of Georgia kind of writ large. And you can kind of see it. When they market the school between football and UGA, it's like a lot of the stuff cross pollinates, right? And I think that is a direct correlation and a direct effect of what Kirby has built. And I think it says a lot about just UGA football in general and how far it's come. And it's not like we were a bunch of slop, under Coach Rick. We were a very good program, but I think it says a lot about what Kirby has been able to do and been able to build in
Yeah,
Athens.
and that's what separates them. I mean, look at the other coaches. I think Harbaugh was one of those guys that really demanded
Totally.
that out of his players, right?
And you can hate Harbaugh, but he knows how to build a culture.
Absolutely. And I love what he did in the draft. Everybody's thinking receiver, and he goes offensive line, and it's not sexy, but man, of course he goes offensive line. If you put money on
They're
that,
going to
good
be
for you.
good, man.
Yeah,
I don't know how long it's going to last, but they'll be good.
yeah, yeah. He was one of those guys, right? And you have Saban now; he's
Yeah.
retired. Can DeBoer be that guy at Alabama? That's what they're used to, and that's what made him so great. I think a lot has to be learned there and witnessed for us to get any idea if he can be that guy. But I think he's a winner. So I
So I
assume he's like that.
so I've talked about this with a close friend of mine, Chris Robinson. I've thrown his name out here a bunch of this podcast. He's now a linebacker coach at University of Alabama. But he and I get together a lot, and he knows I love college football. We talk about things like that he sees in his career. Like, what would we have done differently if we were to go back to UGA now? Like, what did we take from Coach Rick that we thought is beneficial for his career, and how he implements that with his team and the coaches he's coached for. And so I've always had these conversations with folks, with guys I played with in the NFL. A guy named Jeff Hireman played tight end at Ohio State. Jake Stoneburner played tight end at Ohio State. And you can love these coaches or hate these coaches, but the common theme of these like elite level coaches all comes down to one word, and that's competition or compete, right? Um, Mike Pouncey used to say, he goes, Urban Meyer, all he would stress compete, 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 right? Like, are you elite competitor, right? You talk about when you look at Nick Saban, the language he uses, right? Are you elite competitor? Are you willing to compete day in and day out? Kirby Smart, the same. And I think that to me is when I'm talking about it with Christian, or I'm just talking about it amongst friends with you. I think the best coaches, they never get complacent, and they always stress competition because they realize those types of players that A, love to compete, and then B, are willing to go the distance and compete long term, are the ones that ultimately have the best opportunities to succeed in the program.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. NFL draft wise, we'll move on here. Just give a quick recap here. Brock Bowers goes to the Raiders. Not going to stay on these long, but how do they get them the ball is my question. Just absolutely, how do they get them the ball with the quarterback situation there? Falcons, my goodness, Michael Penix. And I'm a resident Atlanta Falcons sufferer here, and very surprised, but also not too surprised. If you're a Falcons fan, you follow the draft, especially over the last 5-6 years. You've been through it. So yeah, I don't know why they didn't go edge or really the best player available, which was Brock Bowers at that time. I don't care if you have Kyle Pitts. Two tight end systems are the best systems oftentimes, and Artie can probably write you a book on that and why that is. But they go Michael Penix at 8, and I do love Penix though. I mean, I said that. I was like, listen, I do love Penix, but I think a part of it, Artie, and I'll run this by you real quick. I was telling my friends because they were asking me what I think, and they're also Atlanta sufferers, and I was just basically like, I think this pick means, and I think news has come out following that to kind of put this in stone as well, at least from reports, was they knew that Penix was going to be sought after, and they knew that teams were trying to trade up and they were going to take him if he was there. So instead of letting that happen, they basically took their guy, even though if you're talking value for pick, probably could have gotten him a little later. But again, they know more than us. They were in the draft rooms. They know what people are doing, what teams are trying to do, what they're moving back, moving forward, whatever, what they're looking for. So maybe we'll look back in it in 7 years when he goes to start for the Falcons that it was a good pick. But hey, the worst part about that, and I'll let you. Worst part about that was Kirk Cousins not knowing about it and him getting really pissed.
Yeah.
That was tough.
Yeah, I think, look, it's Michael Penix I really like. I think he's a good player. 8 is rich for where he went, but I do think, I mean, look, Cousins is really on a 2-year deal. I think most of that money is front loaded in the first 2 years, and I don't think it's a 4-year fully guaranteed contract. He's coming off an Achilles. I mean, Achilles is a tough injury to come back from, and I think Penix is, not an insurance, because I just think that in this day and age in the NFL, and I kind of talked about it about earlier in the show about kind of quarterbacks, right? Like, we live in an offensive driven world for football. And it took over college football, really starting with like Tim Tebow, and then after that spread was fully adopted across college football. Like you need to have a guy under center, right? You need to have a guy. It's no longer like get running back by committee, and have like a Adrian Peterson back. Like it's great to have those dudes, but you need to be able to throw it, and you got to be a little bit of an athlete. And my only thing to make sense out of the Falcons pick is like we know we have a proven guy in Kirk Cousins, but we can't afford to be in a position that we were in last year, right?
Ritter.
Ritter, and whoever else was his backup, right? Like you just can't have Band-Aid. You can't have a quote unquote Band-Aid at quarterback and expect to be a playoff team. And they have so much young talent skill wise that eventually is going to get expensive. And I think they were like, we got to have Kirk Cousins. And if he's not like, if his Achilles pops week 6 because it's not fully healed, we want to have an older but younger rookie quarterback who is a hell of a player and who's smart to plug and play because we got to make a run.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of that was their thought process. Was number 8 rich for him? Yes, it was.
Yeah.
But I could see it. I wouldn't have done it personally, but I'm also not a GM.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm an armchair GM.
Yeah, me too. And I do read a report though after, and they share some things with reporters. Basically, I think it was Jordan Schultz. Basically said that the Falcons had him like the number 2 overall player on their board, and they didn't think that he would be there when he got there. So that's when they took him. And I think that might have been why they didn't tell Kirk because they didn't think it was going to happen. Because I feel like that's a thing you should definitely tell. But then it'll be interesting. We'll move on from this, but the team dynamic there as well when Kirk and then the fan base sees has a bad game, bad throws in a row, a 3-pick game, something like that. All of a sudden you're hearing Penny's chants. That's going to be annoying for the non-ball knowers to be ready for that to happen way too soon.
Mm-hmm.
If Kirk is healthy and maybe take some time to mesh with a new team, which he has, he needs to have a little buffer there from everybody's expectations. But moving on. We'll go through these quick. Amarius Mims to the Bengals. Nick Saban had a weird criticism about Amarius, basically saying that he took himself out of the SEC championship. They had a surgically repaired ankle at 340 pounds after week 3. Right, came back. I mean, knowing Amarius and then knowing the team and the doctors on that Georgia team, Corson, you got Kirby and the way he treats injuries and such. He didn't take himself out of the game, man. That's really tough to assume, and that's what it sounded like, an assumption. I mean, he didn't really expand on it more than that, but it was a weird look to me. I just don't know how you would do that. McConkey to Harbaugh's Chargers. And did you see that video already of Jim Harbaugh, sorry, and his draft call with McConkey? He gave like the Michigan.
No, I didn't.
He gave the Michigan thing to it, like, who has it better than us? You know what I mean? He did the Michigan thing.
You talking about what he said to Lad?
Yes,
Okay,
and Lad's
yes,
well,
I did see that.
He's like, yes, sir. You got a boy from Georgia. I was like, that had to be a little awkward for the man. But
I mean, look, you and I butt heads on this, but I kind of like Harbaugh just because I think he's so freaking weird.
He is funny.
Like,
I don't dislike Harbaugh. Here,
but
Artie, we're not conveying the right thing. Listen, I just didn't like the whole cheating situation. I really didn't. And then I didn't like how it just got swept under the rug. And now they're national champions and nobody's talking about it anymore. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right. Okay. Anyway, so I think Lad McConkey is like the perfect type. Lad McConkey to me is like, reminds me of and again, everyone's just like, why? He's a white wide receiver. He reminds me of Julian Edelman because Edelman is so freaking tough, right? Like if you watch Edelman and the hits that he did, particularly in an earlier part of his career where he was just like, I will do anything to make a name for myself in this league. And before he got like to be a smarter player, quote unquote, where like how to like kind of avoid hits and stuff. But like Lad, he's got more straight line speed, right? And I think someone comped him to Antonio Brown, and I don't think that's a bad comparison. But when you're just talking about like tough, man, like he is a tough player. And like him, love him, hate him, want to see him in jail, want to see him in outer space. Harbaugh knows how identifies tough football players,
Mhm.
right? You mentioned he got an offensive tackle or Joel, the offensive tackle from Notre Dame. Like, a lot of smart people who know a lot of ball say this guy Alt is the real deal in the offensive line, right? He's the type of dude that a Joe Thomas type player. He
Yeah.
anchors your offensive line for 12 years, right? Lyle McConkey, an explosive athlete that can catch 100 balls for you, but he's not going to be afraid to go across the middle, right? Like, I think Justin Herbert has proven that he's a tough kid, right? I'm very excited because I kind of miss that kind of football,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Just tough, man.
Yeah.
And I think Ladd's going to fit the Harbaugh, let's call it culture,
Yeah.
really
I
well.
mean, that's if I feels like that level of football is even coming back more in the NFL. When you look at it, look at the Lions'
I agree.
success, right? Look at what Harbaugh has done in Baltimore over the years. I mean, they are routinely one
Mm-hmm.
of the toughest teams, especially in the interior, both sides, both fronts.
Mm-hmm.
Linebackers always have all pro linebackers. Just the biggest, most physical positions on the field, they're so elite at. And then you look at San Francisco, same way. Those really good teams. So I think that, and I can't wait to watch Herbert and McConkey. That's gonna be great. I mean, once they get that
Man,
connection down where they understand
yeah.
where McConkey understands where to be and how Herbert throws the ball, gets used to catching that. I mean, man, that's gonna be elite, right? And he's that guy. He can catch 100 balls for you. He can catch 100 balls.
And what a career! What a career arc for McConkey,
Yeah,
right? I know. Like, don't get me wrong. It's easy to win in Texas Hold'em when you get pocket aces and pocket kings all the time, and Kirby seems to do that because he's an elite recruiter, and his staff is an elite recruiting staff. But they can develop some talent now,
yeah,
right? Like, they know what they're doing. And Ladd was not a 5-star guy. He was a 3-star
yeah,
dude who wanted to play football at the University of Georgia, who worked his ass off to play football at the University of Georgia. And hell, man, it paid off,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And we come back to that theme. What's the DNA of this team, right? The DNA is I don't care if it's in Sanford Stadium. I don't care if it's in the Georgia Dome. I don't care if it's the Rose Bowl. I don't care if it's freaking Clark Central City Stadium, right? They just want to compete day in and day out, show me my opponent type attitude. And I think Ladd um, did that for 4 years at
yeah.
Georgia, and that's why he was able to find success. Yes, he's naturally talented. Yes, he's gifted, but you got to have that dog,
Dude,
and he's got it.
absolutely. Yeah, and he goes against defensive backs at the University of Georgia every day in practice, and
Yeah, studs.
Him and Javon Buller were working out together the other day. Posted a
Mm-hmm.
tweet about it, and that was great to see for those guys and working each other out. I mean, you couldn't really ask for a better guy to really sharpen your skills against. And I think, and I was telling, I can't remember which podcast it was I was on the other day. No offense to whoever's podcast, but I was talking about 3 stars in Kirby Smart development because he was asking me the difference between Mark Richt and Kirby. And I was trying to name a few things, and I came up with the 3-star success rate, at least in the draft, is great, but also to get there to the draft, you need to contribute in college. And these guys that he's developed from 3 stars, like McConkey, who had no Division I offers, and he wanted to go play at Tennessee. Tennessee wouldn't even offer him, and Georgia's like, yeah, and he immediately that was it for him. He was like, Georgia, a program like that wants to take a chance on me, definitely. He said there was no brainer from then. And then he worked his way in, and 4 stars, 5 stars transferred out because he was taking a spot on that depth chart early because he just
Oh
outworked
yeah.
and improved himself so early, man. And then I don't know, you look back at those title teams without McConkey, what are you doing? There's so many big time first downs, touchdown catches, being in the right spot, right? He always sits down in the right spot, baby. He's like he has eyes in the back of his head.
Well, man, it's an easy question to answer. Without McConkey, you don't win the national championships, right? And people are like, well, no, dude was a baller, right?
Mhm.
Like, he made he made big time plays in big time moments
Yeah.
over that 2 year run, and you need a guy like that. Yes, Stetson Bennett. Yes, the defense was unbelievable, but it's like at the end of the day, he was not as a decorated player as um, Brock Bowers, but he was equally as important, right?
Mhm.
Because you got to have You got to have a deep threat. You got to have a guy in the slot. You got to have a receiver who can do a number of different things really, really well,
Yeah.
because it takes pressure off a guy like Brock,
Yeah.
right? It gives an extra layer of safety blanket for the quarterback, right?
Mhm.
It softens up the coverage a little bit, so you can't throw 8 in the box and stop the run.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
You're
man,
right.
I'm a huge fan of Lad, and football is a team game. It's the greatest team game on earth, right? I don't care what everybody says. And I'm super excited for him because I think he's going to have a long career, right?
Yeah.
10, 12 year career. He
Yeah.
stays healthy.
Absolutely. Stays healthy, knock on wood. I would love to I can't wait to see him play on Sundays, all these guys. And he'll be playing in the stadium he won a national championship in. That'll be his home
Mm-hmm.
turf. Javon Bullough there to the Packers, who I already mentioned. Kamari Lassiter to the Texans, Tyke Smith to Tampa Bay. Those three are so versatile. And I just kept because I covered already I spent 18 hours covering the draft live. I was my brain after that was mush, dude, just absolute mush. But I love this stuff, and I can't wait to watch these guys on Sunday because you can catch me watching Red Zone for 7 hours of commercial free football every Sunday. Um,
Psychopath.
dude, I am. I love it. But those guys are so versatile. Who knows? They could play nickel. They could be outside. I mean, especially Kamara, he can play either or. And then I think Tyke and Ballard there, you can see him at nickel and safety. Cedric Van Pan to Buffalo dropped in this draft, and they got to steal. I don't know. You already think Buffalo Bills, think snow games in New York. If I want a center who's just nasty and comes down with bad intentions down the line or in the second level, Sed's my guy. Sed is absolute my guy. Smart, very smart kid. Great teammate, anchor, durable. Can't wait to watch him in Buffalo and Josh Allen. I mean, it's great for. I mean, he goes to a team with the second most wins in the NFL the last 4 years. So that's awesome to him. Keep winning for him. And then Zion Logue to Atlanta. Georgia Bulldog did find a home for the Atlanta Falcons in this draft, which is nice. And I hope Logue gets a chance to work himself in that rotation as well. Quick last thing on the draft here. We'll get to Kirby, his extension. Georgia, we had 8 draft picks this year, the lowest since 21. That was 9. Next year's going to be crazy. It's going to rival that record 15 and 22. Carson Beck, Michael Williams. I've saw them at the top of like 3 mock drafts from industry leaders of the last week. A couple of them include ESPN's Jordan Reed, one of my favorite guys. He had Carson number 1, Michael number 2 overall. First 2 picks. That would be absolutely ridiculous. And the recruiting pitch, just think of how that gives you, right? And Kirby's already on pace to really blow Nick Saban's draft records out of the water already, which is
Yeah, I saw it was 63 to 48 or something, right? Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
That's a ridiculous stat, man.
Dude, just it's crazy.
I mean, like, and don't get me wrong, I get it. Georgia has a better footprint than the state of Alabama and just recruiting, but that's why Georgia was always the sleeping giant,
Yeah.
right? That's why Georgia has been putting NFL dudes in the league for 50 years, but Kirby tapped into it like never before.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit it right on the head. And speaking of Kirby, he has that draft success. We talk about the records. We talk about the game-winning streaks, the back-to-back national titles, turning Georgia into just a different. The campus is changing. I mean, it's growing so much. I mean, the outside of Athens and those familiar and those still living there, you see that, right? And it's kind of like what Nick Saban did in Alabama. That place looked completely different in Tuscaloosa after his reign. It looks like your favorite city almost. The new stuff and that football money brings in, the success brings in, the people it brings in that want to come live there and be part of that, right? And he gets signed through December 2033, 1.75 million raised per, makes him the highest paid coach in college football. So right, so Saban retires, and then that's Dabo Swinney, who was the number 1 guy. Georgia pays the man, pays Kirby, gets him to $13 million a year. Bonuses up to $1.55 million. And then Josh Brooks gets another extension as well. I mean, Georgia basketball is doing well. Had a good NIT run, and then they're recruiting really well from the portals. Going to have a team that really can fight for an NCAA tournament spot next year. Georgia baseball is doing really well. They most likely at this point will host a regional game. Charlie Condon's breaking all types of records. I mean, Georgia sports.
That's so cool. Pulp for him, man.
Oh yeah,
that's awesome,
dude. Watching Charlie do what he's doing, old Chuck. Chuck Condon, I mean, he's doing great. It's every day. I mean, I'm missing a home run he's doing, and I feel like I'm tweeting them all. So it's yeah, but you pay Josh Brooks from the overall success. You pay Kirby for what he's brought, and we've talked about him so much, and basically already prefaced why he got this contract. Yeah, so I think already for me, it's in this really ever changing and this new season of college football that's coming up with all these historic changes, right? And you can sit here and list so many rule changes. You've got obviously the expanded 12-team playoff. You got uh, conference realignment and SEC that's going to look totally different. And both the way that no divisions, top two play in the SEC championship. You have Texas, Oklahoma, Texas up there in the top five, probably in teams in the country joining. I mean, it's going to be a whirlwind. And then you add transfer portal and all that good stuff, NIL stuff as well. People are trying to put regulations on that. There's not much that makes sense in college football, but paying Kirby Smart a lot of money does.
Well, I want to talk about that, and I want to peel back some of what you were saying when we talk about the development of Athens, the growth of Athens. When you're looking at what happened to the University of Alabama, basically PS and like or BS before Saban and then AS after Saban, right? You look at Tuscaloosa, like if you look at Tuscaloosa, you look at the amount of money that was poured into that town. You look at the number of out-of-state applicants that started applying to the University of Alabama, and then ultimately getting accepted and going to the University of Alabama. I think Georgia has always been in a better academic institution than Alabama. It just has better business school. I think law schools are equivalent, but I think from a research perspective, and just a flagship university perspective, Georgia has always been a better academic institution and has that connection to the city of Atlanta, right? So it really was ripe for this kind of explosiveness or this explosion in growth, right? They recently talked about building a University of Georgia medical school right on campus. Like, I don't think people realize how big of an opportunity that is for university. If you go to University of Florida or you go to University of Michigan or Vanderbilt, they have whole hospitals that are part of the university system because they have a medical school there. And I'm not saying that just because Kirby Smart has been able to build what he's built here, that's why we have a medical school. But I am saying that the two things aren't completely, not related to one another, right? I think the growth at the University of Georgia, the money that has come in, the recognition that has come in, is a direct correlation to the football success that we've had.
Yeah, you
right?
said it right there. Already said money.
Money and the operating budget for the University of Georgia is north of $200 million. Right? They run a surplus every year, which is very hard to do at the college level. You have global brands like UCLA, Florida State, all these schools that run a deficit year in and year out. Yet when you have a well-run, oiled machine and an operation that is printing money and bringing in a surplus, I love Kirby Smart. He's done an unbelievable job. But the CEO of the whole thing is Josh Brooks. And you mentioned Josh Brooks, and you mentioned his ability to, think of the large picture, right? The driving force behind this is football. They now have a well-oiled machine at football. And if you look across the athletic program, right, they have a new tennis facility going up, which is state of the art. The baseball facility has been
Redone
upgraded
softball as
extensively.
well. Yep.
Softball as well, right? Eventually, they're going to build a whole new track complex, probably on Millage, right? The soccer team is doing well. Soccer, I was friends with a bunch of soccer girls. They were unbelievable athletes, but they were an average program. Now they're going deep in the SEC tournament. And I think when you think about this, right, and you think about the transition that we're making in college sports, right, they're trying to put regulation in it where no more opt-outs if you want to sign NIL contracts, because those NIL contracts might be from the same sponsors that host the bowl games. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to pay these players, you should hold them accountable and they should play. But all of this is happening at a time where millions, really billions of dollars is flooding into it. And if you want to be a premier academic and athletic institution in the college sports today, and the college university landscape today, you have to get two things right. You got to have the football coach in place, and you got to have a really good athletic director. And I would say a number three, and not so far behind, but a number three would be a university of president who gets it, right? And when you look at those three, University of Georgia head football coach is a UGA alum. Josh Brooks is not necessarily a UGA alum, but he's been there since he was director of football ops when I was playing. And President Moorhead went to undergrad at UGA, and he went to law school at UGA. When those three are aligned, what you're going to see is an absolute rocket ship, right? A linear rocket ship for the overall growth, the growth of the overall profile for the university. And as two alums on this podcast right now, I always say when the leadership is right, the degree in which the value of my degree only increases, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge thing, man, because I'm proud to be a UGA alum. You know what I mean? And I think you are as well. And obviously, we're fans of the program and blase, but we're watching such a unique time in college sports. We're at the intersection of the upper echelon of higher education, amateurism sports, and business, and they're all colliding, right?
Yeah.
And I think as you and I, who are active commentators on it, I think it's really cool to kind of cover and witness, because things the next 5 to 10 years are going to be actually probably even like 3 to 5 years. It's going to be very interesting to see where this stuff goes. And I think UGA is very well positioned.
Yeah. I look at it as a blessing being able to cover what I
Totally.
do during this time as a Georgia alum. And, I think, you can't control when you're born. Right. So
No, you
unfortunately,
can't.
so I do enjoy being, witnessing a national championship as a senior in my undergrad. And then, the success that has followed, it's been awesome to do. And it's a blessing. So, and I think you said it there as far as those guys aligned. And that's why you're seeing all these improvements. And the medical school is a big part of it. It's getting a little understated nationally, but I think you did a
Totally
great job of
understated.
you did a great job of breaking it down there as well. And the improvements they're making to the stadium as well as Sanford, some much needed
Totally.
bigger press box. Looking forward to being in there soon. And you touched it there too, Artie, because I was going to have a little quick segment here before we get in, and folks, we're going to
Yeah.
end it with Jaden Rashada signing with Georgia. And you kind of mentioned it. I was going to say, put on our commish hats on real quick. What is
Mm-hmm.
one regulation you want to put on NIL? And that was going to be mine. And, you must have read something similar to what I did the other day about that being an option. And I think it's very smart. It's basically, when you said it, when you sign up for these NIL deals, you have to play. You can't opt out.
100%.
And then if we're going to make these guys professionals, which I think they should, and I think they should bank off the sacrifice they put really mainly on their bodies. Right. And how many times and Artie, a lot of those guys that I don't have, had it, everything in their pocket as far as opportunities, and then one bad injury and they're going broke. They're having to go a totally different direction. Maybe they didn't finish school and what have you, and they're in the hole.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I love these guys the opportunity, but also I think you clean up a lot when you sign these NIL contracts that you have to play. Basically, these NIL deals are going to run through the school. And I heard rumblings about this last year. So this has kind of been in the works for a long time as far as these collectives coming in-house with the university. And basically allowing, these deal makers and stuff to still pay them, but also, guys, hey, it's the real world. It's real life. You're going to get paid. You have some stipulations here. You have to play.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's huge for the sport. And also, and speaking from it from like a passionate fan, if I put on that hat real quick, I love that because obviously we want to see our guys play. Whatever team you follow, doesn't matter. You want to see these guys play on Saturdays or Thursday, Friday, Tuesday, whatever, because we play every
Yeah.
day now. But in these bowl games, especially, and at the end of the season, I think that's going to clean up a lot. We're going to have to learn an
Mm-hmm.
entirely new depth chart just to cover an opposing team, which I saw play all year, but half of their team is sitting out because they don't care. So I think it's
Yeah.
great.
I totally agree with you. I think it's right. What I think I think we're going to revisit the transfer rules. I think the portal is there. I think they're going to go back to, you have one basically unfettered transfer, and then you have to graduate earn your degree to transfer again. So you can transfer once, no penalty. If you transfer again before you graduate, you sit out, or you have to wait until you graduate with your degree, a real degree, before you can be a grad transfer, right?
Yeah.
I think and I think all of these little changes, or let's call it amendments, right, when they kind of revisit everything, eventually there's going to be a CBA, and it's probably going to be administered through the NCAA, and that contract, right, might look different for different conferences or different 1, 2, and 3. But I think you're going to start seeing like prolonged healthcare, right? The school has to guarantee former student athletes healthcare until they're 25 or 20, right? Something of that nature. But, and I think we're going to see the transfer rule be amended. I think you're going to start seeing different types of monetary uh, you know, values of contracts that are directly tied to your ability to play, right? Not if you're hurt, right? But I think, no sitting out games, right? If you transfer away from your school, that contract that you had is now, voided, right? Because you're ultimately going to go assign a different contract with a different school. So I do think those things are going to be revisited, and obviously a plethora of other things. But I was very bullish on the hire of Charlie Baker. I think he's a pragmatist. I think he's super, super smart. And I think he values the institution of the NCAA, and he has skin in the game. He played basketball at Harvard. His wife was a gymnast at Northwestern, and he had 3 kids, all of whom played collegiate sports, yes, at different levels. But I think he understands that we are at a pivotal moment in college sports, and to just hold on to this like badge of honor, if that's what you want to call it, of amateurism is stupid. It's short-sighted, and that's the easiest way to get to a super conference or 2 super conferences, which I don't think anyone really wants if they're a fan of college
No,
sports.
no, I don't think so, man. But that really, and I've heard more rumblings about that as well.
Yeah, I don't.
Nothing
I mean,
specific
I'm
that we
still going to
can
watch it because I'm addicted, but
absolutely.
I don't. I don't.
Yeah,
I don't want it.
yeah,
I'd rather have a model of the NFL where you have one league regionalized, and those like conferences or like divisions, if you will. Like the AFC East will be like, the ACC, and the NFC South will be like the SEC, like something like that, and then a playoff system out. But this, I don't want 2 big conferences. I don't
yeah.
want that.
And it sounds like it's going to happen. And also the CFP, there's talks about that expanding as well to 14, and then who knows where we go from there,
It will.
right? And I think Dabo Sweeney basically admitted it on Friday. He did a radio hit with Florida State King Danny Cannell, and basically said, we're having a cup of coffee at 12. And he said it very matter of factly, didn't really describe it, just went on. And I feel like, if he thinks that as well, as the second highest paid coach of college football, he knows something's coming down the line. So I feel like it's going to expand, which I don't think it's that big of a deal to me, but I would be more focused on those, like you said, the power
I'm
to,
pro expansion, but I'm a pro
yeah,
expansion on that. So,
I got you. I got you. I want meaningful games, and I think we'll get them. So, but
yep, totally, 100%.
to end this beautiful show, Artie, we're gonna touch on Jaden Rashada here to end it. We'll get back to strictly football here. So we talked about this with Aaron Murray our last show, and it happened. And I really thought it was just based on how Kirby was acting about it and talked about it. I was there in the press room when he was talking about the quarterback situation after the spring game. And just to rehash it real quick for those who missed, basically we were talking about Georgia needed to add a 4th scholarship quarterback per Kirby Smart. He wants 4. Basically, their plan is they want 4 scholarship quarterbacks and a really good walk-on. They have a really good walk-on in Coulter Ginn out of this class. They have Ryan Puglisi, who is hurt right now, but he'll be healed up for fall camp, and a very, very minor stress fracture in his knee, swimming from high school. So that only put him 3. And then you have the UNLV quarterback that committed to Georgia for a cup of coffee, and then like the next day went to USC, right? So I think Georgia showed effort there in the portal and then in the winter, and they showed more effort here in the spring. And they get Arizona State transfer Jaden Rashada, 6'4", pretty light, like 185. They have him listed out. I'm willing to bet he's, that's just a freshman measurement. Willing to bet he's bigger than that now. But he came on campus for a 2-day visit, I believe, or 3-day, Tuesday to Wednesday, and the end of April and then committed while he was on the visit. It makes sense, from Georgia's standpoint, obviously. Kirby talked about it. But, Aaron said something that stood out to me already. Is he said, he didn't think that Georgia, I said it kind of matter of factly to him, he needed to. And Aaron was like, I don't think he needs to do it. I don't think Georgia needs a fourth, another quarterback there. I think if they do add one, it won't just be another body. They're just not going to add a guy to add a guy. So I think when people look at this, the depth chart, I don't think much movement's going to be there for Stockton and Beck, who know this offense better than anybody. But Puglisi and then Rashada right here, I think they compete for that third spot as well. But I think he has the tools and obviously the mindset to me already, because if he's going to come into a loaded QB room like this with established guys, and obviously Beck is going to be gone after this season, but you have guy Gunnar Stockton going to his redshirt sophomore campaign there, third year in the system. And then Puglisi, very highly rated and did some good things in early spring and bowl practices. I mean, I think that shows some mental makeup enough to be like, all right, I'm ready to compete. And, we talked about it, Georgia and Kirby Smart, they demand that competition. So I don't think they're going to add a guy that's not willing to compete. I don't think they're going to add a guy who just wants to be here just to be here and, just ride kind of the coattails for however many months and then transfer in December. So I think there's a chance for him to really compete and develop there, and who knows what could happen, right? What am I getting? You think I'm getting it right as far as the mindset that from the outside looking in and kind of assuming here that Kirby Smart and Georgia really chose Rashada here instead of the other way around, or just adding a body per se.
No, look, I think you made a great point by bringing up Aaron's point from the last podcast we had. Like, they were not just going to add a body to add a body, right? I think they were going to add a body if that body could be a difference maker down the road. They obviously have a top 5 prospect in Carson Beck, potentially the number 1 overall pick. Obviously, there's been a lot of people that have been preseason top overall pick, but I think if he does what he's supposed to do, he will be a top 3 pick. Let's say that. But then, it's wide open. And Gunnar Stockton is like a Georgia boy through and through, Raven County, North Georgia, broke a bunch of records. He'll bleed for UGA. I have no doubt. Can obviously spin it pretty good. Ryan Puglisi is Massachusetts native. Went to high school in Connecticut, so I'm partial to him. But this guy Rashida, he could have went anywhere. His name is well known because of the drama of his recruitment, which I don't think was really his fault. He was just kind of a casualty of the world we live in.
Yeah, I can. And you want to give some background to that for those who maybe not?
Yeah, I think it's worth it because that's how I knew his name. Yeah. I didn't know his name from his play.
Yeah, I'll just get into it quick and you continue there. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Basically, so the story with Rashada here, very, very highly recruited at the top of the main, your rivals 24/7 and such, and those recruiting services, among the top quarterbacks in the country, right? And he was committed to Miami for a while, decommitted, committed to Florida, reportedly signed a $13 million NIL deal with Gator Collective, right? And as I read, after the news came down that we were really interested in Rashada, and likewise for him as well. Well, basically, the Gator Collective didn't come through that first payment, and he sensed some murkiness there, and got out of his national letter of intent, and then boom, he's found without a school, right? He needed to go somewhere. He goes to Arizona State, where his dad played. He won the starting job as a true freshman over the spring and summer there, and then plays 2 games. Arizona State, kind of a gimmicky offense. I was watching clips and tried to do a little tape on Rashada, and they were running a lot of wildcat out of the gun, stuff like that. So you could tell that maybe they didn't trust him a lot because he was a true freshman, and rightly so. I get it. But he played 2 games there, 485 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, 3 picks total for the season. He played in 2 games earlier, got hurt, missed the majority of the season, and I think he played a few snaps against Arizona in the finale there for him. But so he's very green here. But that's kind of the recruiting drama and how he got to Arizona State, and obviously now finds himself in a very, very good team at Georgia. And you could continue there, Artie. I'm sorry for interrupting you, buddy.
No, you're good. Look, I appreciate the context. I think it's important because I think what he needs more than anything else is stability and an opportunity to develop. I think I know there are probably some people who listen to this podcast that do not like Mike Bobo, and I think people who listen to this podcast know that I love Mike Bobo. And I will say this with confidence that he is a great developer and coach of the quarterback position. And I think that all three guys behind Beck have a really unique opportunity, right? They don't have the pressure of being the guy yet. They're all young enough and have lively arms and have talent to learn and develop for a year behind a guy that has done it and done it at a high level and under the tutelage of Mike Bobo. And they're at the University of Georgia, where quite literally they are surrounded by 5 stars. And to be honest, they were all 5 stars. So, or 4 or 5 stars, but you get what I'm saying. So I think for Rashada and I think for the other two guys, Ryan and Stockton, I think it's going to be an awesome competition of those three in the spring, right? And my guess is Stockton, not all three will be there in the fall, but someone will rise, right, of the three. And I think they're going to put themselves in a position to do very well. And I think Jaden, more so than the other two, will be able to flourish in this, let's call it year of growth, if you will, right? He might get some opportunity to play some ball. Maybe he won't, right? I don't know. But it's like it goes a long way to just get some stability in your life, right? And that's beyond football. That's like, putting stability in your life at any stage of your life is huge. But I think for a young guy like that who kind of got put through the ringer, whether it was his fault or not, or his dad, or Florida, or it's like 17, 18 years old, like that's got to be pretty volatile emotionally, mentally, psychologically. So what I'm hoping for him is he can come into UGA, learn, grow, develop, and then if he is as good as they say he's supposed to be, I think he puts himself in a great position to contribute this time next year.
Yeah, and experience. He immediately has more game experience than
Yeah, totally.
Stockton, I want to bet. I mean, he took 184 snaps last year. I really doubt that. I don't know what Stockton count is total, but I doubt it's even that. So I think he provides that as well. But you look at beyond that, and you have Ryan Montgomery coming in 2025 classes. There's a QB dynamic here for Georgia in the next couple of years. And then he's a top 15 passer rather. And then Jared Curtis, number 1 QB prospect in the 26th class. So Georgia has some guys there. They have the guys at least right now, and you never know what can happen in the world of recruiting or NIL, not NIL, but transfers. So that's what we know for right now. So that's kind of the dynamic there. And yeah, so I love. I don't know if it's Rashada or Rashada. I think you said it Rashada. So now I have my guessing. Now I'm guessing. Like, am I saying it right? Capital J journalism here.
Jaden Rashada, I think is.
Is it
I think
Rashada?
I was saying Rashada.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that's what I've been saying. I just want to make sure.
Jaden, my bad, dude. My bad, Jaden.
Yeah,
My
man.
bad.
We'll get it right. We'll get it right. We promise.
I couldn't pronounce English. I couldn't pronounce English muffin until I was about like 13. Don't ask me why I couldn't pronounce it, but I couldn't. So don't hate me,
He's in
coach. All
Boston.
right.
He's in Boston. Great show, Artie. I really appreciate you jumping on, guys.
Oh yeah, always.
And watching us. If you're watching us on the Pulse Sports Network on YouTube, like, subscribe. Tell your friends. Georgia football, folks. Also, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for listening. And then we also, if you want to check out the Players Lounge, I have words there covering Georgia, Tennessee, Clemson, but mainly Georgia here. I add what I can. We have a lot of young talent there rising up in the writing ranks as well. Your forums for your teams in Georgia. You got Graham Coffey from Dog Central running that. Player interviews. You've probably already seen some of the best interviews in all the land. Carson Beck was on several times last year. Sure, he'll have another lineup with our buddy Aaron Murray. So check that out when you can. We appreciate it. And also, I want to give a quick shout out to my sister Ansley. I'm officially an uncle. My sister Ansley. Absolutely. Well done, Ansley. Little link.
Congratulations, JC.
Thank you. I cannot wait to teach him how to play with fire. It's going to be great. Uncle
Loved
J,
it.
Uncle JC, Fireworks Fire, all that. So can't wait for that. So I want to give her a shout out. And also one more thing, UJ Football Live with JC Shelton is looking for Georgia-based businesses to sponsor our show. So if you have an idea, if you know somebody that might be interested, or you yourself have something that you would like us to push for you, we'd be happy to help out and point some people in your direction. So if you have anything like that, drop a comment below and we'll get in touch and talk that through. Artie, we really appreciate you, man. Until next time, go Dogs.
Go Dogs.